Okay, it is noon. So welcome to everyone. I hope those who joined early, you get a little bit of a pre-show. So I encourage people next week to log in early. We're gonna commit to this Friday noon East Coast time. I know we've been playing around with the schedule. This seems to work well. It lets people on the West Coast wake up to the show, and of course, everyone on the East Coast can take a break at lunchtime and join us. So, welcome to Women on the Week Roundtable Sharp Perspectives. I'm Meredith Jacobs, CEO of Jewish Women International and former editor in chief of the Washington Jewish Week. This week, I am honored to be joined by Helen Chernikoff and Carly Pildis. Helen is the news editor at The Forward, and she really works to refine The Forward's news strategy as well as coaching reporters so that they bring in original stories. Before coming to The Forward, she was the first web director of the New York Jewish Week. And she's to be credited with creating not only JW Food and Wine, but the very important blog, The New Normal, about disability in the Jewish community. I really feel, Helen, that the new normal was what really brought talking about disability into the mainstream of Jewish life. So,
Oh,
so
thank
thank
you.
you for that work.
That's
Carly Pildis has dedicated her career to fighting for justice, equality on a global and national scale. In fact, she was named one of the Forward 50 in 2019 at the annual list of influential American Jews. She's currently the director of grassroots organizing for the Jewish Democratic Council of America. Your commercials have been amazing, by the
thank
way.
you.
And she's a columnist for The Forward, but she is also a sought after speaker and writer. And you may have read her or heard her on any number of platforms and events. But let's get started. Helen, you've been covering the protest in Borough Park, New York. I'm just going to kick it to you. What is going on there?
Okay, so it's actually it's actually a pretty straightforward cause and effect in play here. On Tuesday, Governor Cuomo announced new COVID-19 restrictions for places in New York State that have reached a certain level of positivity rate. In Most of these do map up with Orthodox Jewish, Haredi Jewish communities inside and outside New York City. Inside the city, the neighborhood is called Borough Park, and these new rules were really received there with a lot of anger, a lot of pain. I think it's really important to understand that for this community, going to shul, and especially at the high holidays, of course, is not something that they really see as something they can do or not do, like many of us can and do. It's a real something that's really hard for them to get their head around that kind of point of view, and I think impossible for many of them. So it's been a real struggle since the beginning, since March, for these folks to stay away from their synagogues, and that they've done so to the extent that they have has really been pretty amazing, especially in the beginning. And what happened over the summer was that there was, as predicted by health experts, a kind of dip in virus rates, and according to people that I've talked to, the leadership in those communities did not handle it very well. I mean, I don't. It must be very hard. It's very hard to be a leader of any kind. I'm sure they're very tired, and they were just relieved that they could enjoy their community life the way they want to over the summer. But there was apparently no warning that in the fall there would most likely need to be another retrenchment of religious life. And indeed, because of the lifestyle of these communities, very small apartments, frequent gathering. As there was a spike around the country and around the state, the spike there was more intense. And I think this is like a very known factor in psychology that when people are never given something, they might want it, but when people are given something and then it's taken away, there's like a very unique kind of pain and rage that comes with that. And that is what is playing out now with the announcement of these new rules. Another factor that's complicating things is that there's a lot of confusion about there's the state's rules and there's the city's rules, and the governor in general, his rules will trump the mayor's, but the mayor is the one who's in charge of the police in the city. And so there's the whole sort of announcing the rules, which people really don't like, and then there's the question of, are they going to be enforced, and are the police, are the NYPD being clearly told what to do? And actually, we discovered yesterday when a reporter of ours, Ari Feldman, participated in the mayor's press conference that they're not really, and they never have been. And they're still kind of working on it. You know, these are complicated legal questions that bear on constitutional rights and public health. And there's still a lot of confusion. And Saturday night is Simchat Torah, where there will be a lot of big outdoor parties, and it's just still kind of unknown what is going to happen. But what we did write about this week was that there were big protests in Borough Park, and there was like a religious element to some of them because it's the middle of Sukkot, and people were celebrating certain festivals, but they were also protesting, and they had Trump flags. So that was kind of a long answer, but there's one figure in particular who we've really been writing about. And if you want me to follow up about him, this new leader, I can do that, but I'll just stop since I've been going on for a while.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how they're now, from what I'm reading, burning of masks. There have been calls for Trump to intervene, and and again, another example of how a public health crisis is being so politicized.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going to come of it. Is this further entrenchment and really within the Jewish community when it comes to political parties, Trump, Biden,
Yeah, well, we wrote about that. We published a piece on that this morning. The Haredi world has in general supported Trump pretty broadly in 2016, and support for him in those communities seems to have only intensified. The thing that was really interesting about this week was that there seemed to be an emotional component to it that there hadn't been before, and that's why we saw this dancing with Trump flags and the emergence of this leader in this community whose name is Heshi Tischler, who has kind of Trumpian qualities, and he's very he likes to use taboo racist language, and a lot of experts and people in the community have characterized him as the person who tells it like it is and says the things that other people think but don't want to say. So it's really just like Trump, and he's very aligned with Trump himself. He's linked his stance on masking to Trump's. I want to just be fair. It's not like this guy is a total anti-masker. If you really talk to him, he says sometimes a person should wear a mask, but he still leans into the notion that an individual should get to an individual's preferences on that, and thought process should prevail over what someone else, a doctor, a health expert, says to do. So with him kind of coming to the fore is a kind of like avatar of Trump. We see a different kind of support for Trump, but like electorally, I don't know how much of a difference there will be since the support was already there.
Right. That absolutely makes sense. Um, I was going to talk about Amy Coney Barrett's nomination. I just want to watch that, but I do want to touch on it because then I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the VP debate. Carly, perhaps you'd want to start. I'm interested in how kind of the debate around her nomination when it comes to talking about her views on choice, even some of her rulings against sexual assault survivors on college campuses, is turning into some kind of an anti-Catholic message. And what do we do, especially as women of faith, as women who tend to like call on our work being based in our Jewish values? How do we react to someone who is a woman, who's a woman of faith, who may call upon her beliefs when it comes to influencing her work? How do we kind of debate this?
It's a great question. And I think first we have to touch on the process. And I know that sometimes for people out of Washington, that can feel sort of dense and uninteresting, but it is actually deeply important for Americans to understand that the Supreme Court is an incredibly important institution that is being weakened and attacked by Republican rule. We have this McConnell rule. It's literally called the McConnell rule, in which in election years, we wait until after the election. It is how they stole a seat from President Obama. And that was 100 days out. We're talking less than 40, and they are putting up a nominee. Now we're 27 days out, and they're trying to cram this down America's throats, totally reversing, as Senator Lindsey Graham said, use my words against me in the future. And people are, and they're saying, we're going to do it anyway. So I really think before we even talk about the faith part, it's really important for Americans to understand that, we have a democracy, and democracies have to have rules and strong institutions. And this is really an attack on a very important institution.
But to be fair, if it was reversed and if the Democrats were in charge of the Senate and the White House and had a feeling that the polls were going in the wrong direction, they were going to lose power, would they also be doing the same thing?
To me, it's a little bit irrelevant because this is a Republican standard set by a Republican Congress that they are now refusing to follow. Put it this way, if Democrats were in power and said, we don't think that's a standard we would like to hold the Senate to as the ruling party, I think you have a very fair argument there. It's a pretty obscure thing they tried to do. And Democrats argued at the time that they shouldn't be allowed to do it. That has always been their position. So Republicans created a rule, and now they're reversing it. And that's, I think, what so many people find so objectionable. It's raw political opportunism. It isn't saying this is what we think about election year appointments. It's saying we think we should get to do what we want when we're in power, and that's bad for democracy, which we should all care about. In terms of the faith, my faith informs my values, and my values inform how I view policy. But I don't look at halacha and American policy as innately tied. So, for example, my Jewish values, certainly around things like how we treat people experiencing poverty, how we treat the stranger in our community, are very much influenced by our Jewish values. But I don't take the intricacies of how halacha is designed to really rule a Jewish life and a Jewish community and apply that broadly and applicably to a secular world, which actually our tradition urges us not to do. It says the laws of your land matter and you need to follow them. That's right there in the Talmud. So I think for me, it's actually really clear. There's a difference between values influencing your analysis of policy and saying my religion's laws are policy. Those to me are really distinct and separate. And to the anti-Catholic point, I mean, the nominee, Vice President Joe Biden, is a lifelong Catholic. So I'm not here to parse anyone's Catholicism, but I think people are very upset both by this really undemocratic process and by her very extreme views, came out opposing IVF, took money from anti-gay hate groups and anti-trans hate groups, groups that abroad pushed laws criminalizing homosexuality. There's a lot to be very angry about in her policy world, and she needs to own her policy decisions.
And Helen, I know you had some thoughts on this when we were talking earlier.
Well, I think Carly said what I was thinking really better than I would have. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, sure.
Here's something that I'm really wondering about in these days. The kind of the raw political, the raw assertion of political power that the Republicans seem to have no problem doing. And I sometimes wonder, and I guess this goes to the whole court packing question that's out there, if the Democrats should not be more like the Republicans. I mean, it is very offensive that McConnell made this, there was this McConnell rule and now it's no longer the rule. But I can see how what they're doing makes sense, and that I would say maybe the Democrats should do that kind of thing too, and maybe even more in terms of pushing the envelope. Isn't that the place that we're in right now?
There were similar calls
So
when I've been told the negative ads. Someone was in the hospital and someone said, I read some statement saying, "Why? Go for it." You know, he would do it. So Carly, what as
So there's two things there. First of all, I think there's a difference between political gamesmanship and running good, hard political strategy and wanting to win. This is Washington. Everyone wants to win and doesn't like to pull their punches. And doing that in a way that strengthens American institutions, because that is the oath you took to protect America and American democracy. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I know exactly where the line is on every fight, but I do think that it is important and a part of that sort of hard-nosed tactics to also weigh the fact that you took an oath to protect and uphold American democracy. And if both parties stop doing that, we are in serious trouble. Now, does that not mean I think, you know, I have enormous respect for Democratic Party leadership. I think they've done incredible work in very difficult circumstances. And I also think it's worth balancing the fact that they took an oath to uphold our democracy and protect it.
Although, did you?
And in terms of the negative ads, I think some of that is, I don't think it's kindness as much as it is strategy. And also, again, caring about American institutions like the presidency. The Democratic Party cares about our Constitution and about our system and thinks it's the best system in the world. Republicans have been very clear they do not.
Have you seen reports that some Republicans are beginning to make the case that we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic, and kind of parsing out the difference?
That's what they're talking about. I never understood that. Thank you.
I mean, like in the true Athenian sense, that we don't vote on every issue, that seems like a real attempt to obfuscate on issues that have vital importance to the American people. And let's be clear, this iteration of the Republican Party has obfuscated, has denied information, has put American lives at risk, has lost over 210,000 American lives. And I often tell people it is not the Democrats that changed dramatically in their behavior. I used to work in nonpartisan advocacy. It's the Republican Party under President Trump that has so dramatically lurched rightward, and in some ways really failing even to articulate what a philosophy or sort of moral guiding vision for the country is at all, other than raw political power. And I think it's devastating for the country.
You know, something I think about a lot is that people love to say, oh, the left eats its own. But if you look at what has happened in the Republican Party, how come nobody says that about them? I mean, remember that time after Trump was elected where every day someone was saying they were going to get out of politics, and there was this crazy amount of turnover in Congress?
That's exactly right. You know, when I worked, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's the point. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, look at a career of someone like former Representative Charli Dent, a young Republican, very popular, probably had re-election sewn up. You know, I, in many instances, worked with his office, not obviously at Jewish Dems, but in other jobs, and retired. That's someone that could have served for another 40 years as a great moderate Republican voice. I think you're absolutely right. Every party has its politics and has its tensions, and everyone wants to build a big tent. But we have seen a massive wave of people leaving, and really wonderful people in some instances retiring from Congress, leaving, not wanting to be part of this. And yes, I think your analysis is quite accurate. The right has very much eaten its young, unless they were the very far right.
Right.
Although I saw a very funny tweet after the super spreader event from the White House that said, you know, we thought Trump was going to kill the Republican Party. We didn't know it meant literally. So just.
And as a, you know, I live in DC, and I think people outside of DC forget that this is a real place where real people live, and they're not all multimillionaire politicians. And, you know, it's having a major ripple effect on the city. It's having a major ripple effect. You know, there had been some hope that DC public schools might be able to open soon. And now we're seeing, you know, the White House has an enormous amount of workers that are not millionaires with private jets that take them to private hospital suites, but are, you know, making in the $30,000 a year range, cooking and cleaning and serving America. And I think the super spreader event just showed such a deep disrespect for life and for American life, and for the need to protect our government's ability to function. So it was just a really, you know, I never wish ill health on anyone, but it was just really, really reckless, and demonstrates that this is not a leader that can take this country out of this pandemic crisis. They're not willing to do it, or not capable.
Yeah, let's segue into the VP debate. And again, there's so much to unpack there. This recent focus on her facial expressions, on Senator Harris's facial expressions, which I, for one, loved. But I have to point out that all three of the men, Trump, Biden, and Pence, made similar laughing, sneering, eye rolling, and yet you know, nothing was called out about it. I know that the Biden campaign even texted Jake Tapper. I was watching CNN afterwards, saying absolutely that Senator Harris was very aware of the need to thread the needle, and really, unfortunately, so. And I wanted to talk about the misogyny that she and really all women who run for office face. And on top of that, how race plays a role in her particular candidacy. So, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. You know, Senator Harris to me is just such an important American figure, especially right now, and really who this country needs. Someone who I really feel like represents my family. You know, my husband is the son of African immigrants. We are a Jewish family that is mixed and products of immigrants, and just like such a powerful moment for us. And I think for families like ours that have felt very and are very much under attack by this administration that is telling white supremacists to stand by and encouraging them to interfere with this election. So just even seeing her on stage, such a vision of what America really is when it is truly great. In terms of what Senator Harris faces, there's a great term for this called misogynoir, which is the intersection of misogyny and racism, this particular set of oppression that Black women face. And it's true. You know, people put unbearably high standards on her, expect absolute perfection, while the president is allowed to simply just not follow the rules, yell at moderators, and throw tantrums. That said, I think Senator Harris did an incredible job.
Helen, go ahead. You were.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Carly. I just wanted to underscore the point. Trump can't even. He's not even coherent a lot of the time, which I find so terrifying. And I don't know. I was just so elated by her performance and seeing a woman and a woman of color.
And a brilliant woman.
Yes, like
she was brilliant woman.
So much by far the smartest.
Yeah.
It's hard for me, and maybe this is just naivete, but it's hard for me to really worry about that backlash. And I read some terrible things this morning. I read Anne Helen Peterson's newsletter. She used to be at BuzzFeed, and she is just an amazing writer. And she said something like, it's so banal what people who hate Harris are saying about her. And she was just kind of like, is that the best you got, people? And I wonder if there isn't something to that. Like she's just so good. You can't really get over on someone who's that smart. And I just think maybe she's made progress for all of us in doing so well and being so articulate.
Well, I think even in that, Mr. Vice President, I am speaking was such a powerful moment. I hope for every woman and girl in America where we've all faced that. We've all had some man interrupt, talk over, take credit for our words, twist our words, and to very firmly and confidently say,
yeah,
I have the floor now, you will now listen, was so powerful, I felt.
And I think what is so great about it is this refusing to apologize for existing and for taking up space, both in the debate and in the national consciousness. Like, I am speaking, I am speaking, I am speaking, I am still speaking. Calm, elegant, and very, very firm, and treading the needle of the enormous amount of, frankly, like totally racist, totally misogynistic things that are projected on her and on her candidacy and on her career, and just shutting it down. It was such a beautiful thing. I mean, I see people buying I'm Speaking shirts, like, I'm going to buy one this weekend. It was beautiful. It was iconic. And I hope women, I think every woman, like you said, has had a moment at work where they were just like, I'm still talking. And I encourage women to take up space. Most people in offices I am in learn pretty quickly that, like, I'm still speaking, and I encourage everyone to.
I love that. Okay, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I do want to end with, for those of you who are not currently following Carly on Twitter, do yourself a favor and do so right now at Carly Pildis. If for nothing else, then Carly's posts every Friday when she tweets her Shabbat. So, Carly, what are you making tonight for dinner?
So it's Sukkot, so I just have to have stuffed cabbage. And it's my mom's recipe, and it's super old school. It's got ginger snap cookies in it. It's got a whole bag of prunes and golden raisins, and I love it. And it just when I was making it, I was getting really emotional. I was like, it smells like my mom is here. And then I it's a bit of work, so I wanted something easy for dessert. I'm gonna make Ina Garden's apple tarts, which are just really easy, sort of puff pastries apple. I call recipes like that. I'm like, they're a layup. They're quick.
I
Yeah.
know what you mean about the stuffed cabbage. I feel that power in bringing my mother's, my grandmother's, my aunt's recipes to the table that, it smells like Yontif, it smells like Shabbat, and how important it is to bring not only the recipes, but those women to our tables, especially around our holidays.
And I find that, like, now in this time that is so unstable and so dark, I find real comfort in eating the food of our women, and thinking about, what they were going through when they were coming to America, when they were living in places where they couldn't have when they were living in America and couldn't have a bank account, when they were experiencing violence and political instability, and how to them, even in a fairly scary time, my life is unbelievably lavish and safe, and I'm much freer than they could have ever been. So eating their food and meditating just on that, I find deeply nourishing.
Oh, I agree. I tell this story often. I started making challah on 9/11. I had to run back to the nursery school to pick up my daughter. And one of the teachers just so happened to have been making challah with the kids. And the whole school smelled like challah. And it felt in this terrible, terrible time, there was something comforting in it. And that's what started me making challah every week, was that moment of the comfort of the smell and the food.
It turns out they were onto something, right? Like, Jewish ritual is sustaining, and it's life affirming.
Especially when it's delicious.
Yes.
That helps.
So with that, I want to actually invite everyone listening today to join us next Friday from 3:30 to 4:30 for Jewish Women Vote. We are having a very special, nonpartisan, pluralistic celebration of Shabbat and voting. This is actually being brought to you by JWI and CJW Hadassah, and we are being joined by, I think, every single Jewish women's organization. It is fabulous. There's going to be Jofa, Naamat, Lilith, Keshet, Women of Reform Judaism, Women's Foundation of New York. I mean, I could go on and on and on. SDT, AE5, Women's Rabbinic Network. You will get information about this for us. Please, please, please join us. And please join us next week, Friday, noon Eastern, for Women on the Week. Carly, Helen, thank you. Thank you not only for today, but for bringing us the news each and every day.
And thank you for convening this. This is such a great thing to be doing.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.